Think about the last person you would ever suspect. Not a stranger, not someone on the margins. Someone you know. Someone you work with. Someone who shows up early, stays late, knows the procedures better than anyone in the building. Someone who goes to Mass every Sunday without fail. Who prays the rosary on his lunch break. Who coaches his kids, drives a used car, lives in a modest house in the suburbs, and talks about God and country like he actually means it. Now imagine that person has been selling your country's most classified secrets to the Soviet Union for 22 years, from inside the FBI, without ever once being seriously suspected. His name is Robert Philip Hanssen, and the real thing is far more disturbing than anything fiction has produced. February 18th, 2001, Foxstone Park, Vienna, Virginia, a quiet suburban park, the kind of place where people walk dogs on Sunday afternoons. Underneath a wooden footbridge is a piece of white tape, a signal, a dead drop is loaded. Robert Hanssen reaches under the bridge. He does not make it back to his car. FBI surveillance teams move in. He looks at the agents surrounding him and says 3 words. What took you so long? 22 years. One of the most damaging intelligence penetrations in American history. Classified documents, source identities, nuclear war plans, signals intelligence methods flowing directly to Moscow. And when it was finally over, the FBI did not crack the case through brilliant counterintelligence work. They bought his KGB file from a Russian source for $7 million. That detail alone tells you everything you need to know about Robert Hanssen. If you want the full Declassified story, hit that like button and subscribe to History Unclassified. Every detail verified, most of it classified until 2001. Hanssen joins the FBI in January 1976. 31 years old, accounting background, graduate degree in information systems from Northwestern University. Within 2 years, he transfers to Soviet counterintelligence. The FBI has just handed its most sensitive operational unit to the man who will betray it for the next 2 decades. His first contact with Soviet intelligence comes in 1979. He does not wait to be recruited. He volunteers. He writes a letter to the GRU, Soviet military intelligence, includes enough classified information to prove he is genuine, and asks for money. Not ideology, not politics, money, and recognition. The GRU pays him. He provides more. Then he does something with no parallel in American espionage history. He stops, on his own. Without being caught, he destroys the evidence and goes back to being an FBI counterintelligence agent as though nothing happened. His wife Bonnie finds documents. She confronts him. Hanssen tells her he was passing disinformation. She believes him. They go to a priest. The priest tells him to give the money to charity. He gives some to Mother Teresa. He keeps the rest. He returns to work, gets promoted. In 1981, he is transferred to the Intelligence Division at FBI headquarters in Washington. Access to some of the most classified counterintelligence files in the United States government. He waits. He watches. He learns the system from the inside. In October 1985, he makes contact again, this time with the KGB directly. He sends a letter to Viktor Cherkashin at the Soviet Embassy in Washington. Cherkashin has just handled another walk-in, a CIA officer named Aldrich Ames, 2 penetrations at the highest levels of American intelligence, simultaneously, both volunteers, both motivated by money, neither aware of the other. In his first communication, Hanssen provides 3 things: the identities of 3 KGB officers working as FBI double agents, the existence of a classified tunnel being dug under the Soviet Embassy in Washington, and a document describing American signals intelligence collection against Soviet targets. The 3 officers, Valery Martinov, Sergei Motorin, Boris Yuzhin, are recalled to Moscow within months. Martinov and Motorin are executed. Yuzhin receives 15 years in a labor camp. 3 men, named in Hanssen's first letter, gone within a year. The tunnel, costing tens of millions and years of planning, is immediately compromised. The Soviets keep using it, feeding disinformation through lines they know are monitored turning America's own operation against itself. This is just the first letter. Hanssen's operational security is extraordinary. He refuses to meet his handlers in person, ever, dead drops only. He never reveals his real name, operating as Ramon Garcia, never photographed by Soviet intelligence, never travels to Moscow. The KGB find this unusual. They accept it because what he is providing is too valuable to risk losing. He knows this. He understands leverage. That understanding is what keeps him alive for 22 years. He is still inside the FBI. Still going to work every day, still attending Mass every Sunday, still telling colleagues about loyalty, integrity, and service to country. Nobody has the faintest idea. By 1986, Robert Hanssen has been inside the KGB's pocket for less than a year. The damage is already irreversible, but Hanssen is not finished. He is just getting started. The intelligence he provides through the late 1980s represents the most comprehensive penetration of American national security in Cold War history. Not the most famous. The most comprehensive. Aldrich Ames gets the headlines. Hanssen does more damage. That is not an opinion. It is the conclusion of the official FBI damage assessment completed after his arrest in 2001. Let us be precise about what he hands over. In 1986, Hanssen provides the KGB with a document so sensitive its classification level remains partially redacted to this day. It is a detailed assessment of American nuclear warfighting strategy. Specifically, the continuity of government plans. What happens to the United States government in the event of a nuclear strike? Where leadership relocates? How command and control is maintained? Which facilities are hardened? Which communication systems survive a first strike? This is not peripheral intelligence. This is the architecture of American survival in a nuclear war, handed to Moscow in a package left under a footbridge in a suburban park. In the same period, he provides details of a highly classified NSA program called COINS 2, a compartmented intelligence system used to share the most sensitive signals intelligence between American agencies. Knowing the system exists, knowing how it works, allows Soviet intelligence to identify what the Americans are and are not intercepting. It is a map of American blind spots. He provides the identities of additional Soviet intelligence officers working as American assets. Each one is recalled. Each one disappears into the Soviet system. Some are executed, some simply vanish from the record. The exact number of sources lost directly because of Hanssen remains classified. The FBI damage assessment estimates it runs into double figures. He provides details of American technical collection operations, satellites, ground stations, intercept programs, methods that had taken decades and billions of dollars to develop, handed over in dead drops at parks and bridges across the Virginia suburbs, and through all of it, he goes to work every day. In 1987, Hanssen is assigned to the FBI's Soviet Analytical Unit. His job officially is to analyze KGB operations against the United States. He is now being paid by the FBI to study the organization he is actively working for. The intelligence he produces in this role is considered outstanding by his supervisors. It is outstanding. He knows exactly what the KGB is doing because he is part of it. In 1989, he does something that even now, 2 decades later, intelligence analysts describe as breathtaking in its audacity. He provides the KGB with the name of a KGB officer who has been secretly approaching the FBI. The officer has not yet been formally recruited. He is in the early stages of making contact. Hanssen identifies him and passes his name to Moscow before the FBI can complete the recruitment. The officer is recalled. The potential source is neutralized before he ever becomes one. Hanssen is not just protecting himself. He is actively managing the intelligence landscape to ensure his own operation remains undiscovered. He is playing both sides simultaneously, and he is better at it than anyone on either side realizes. In 1991, something unexpected happens. The Soviet Union collapses. The KGB is dissolved and reconstituted. The infrastructure of Soviet intelligence that Hanssen has been working within for 6 years is dismantled and rebuilt under new names, new structures, new leadership. Hanssen stops again. For the second time in his career, he simply walks away. No pressure, no discovery. He assesses the situation, decides the risk outweighs the benefit, and goes quiet. He remains quiet for nearly 3 years. During this period, he is promoted again. In 1992, he is assigned to the State Department as the FBI's liaison to the Office of Foreign Missions. He has a cover story now, an official reason to be in contact with foreign nationals, to attend diplomatic functions, to move in circles that a standard FBI agent would never access. He uses none of it for espionage. He is genuinely quiet. But the money runs out, and the deeper need that was never really about money, does not. In 1994, he makes contact again. The KGB is now the SVR, Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service. New name, same people. Same interest in what Robert Hanssen knows. He resumes where he left off. The dead drops continue. The packages continue. The payments continue. By this point, Hanssen has been paid approximately $600,000 in cash and diamonds by Soviet and Russian intelligence. It is not a fortune by the standards of what he has provided. He knows this. He has told his handlers in writing that the material he is providing is worth vastly more than what they are paying him. He is correct. They know he is correct. They pay him more. He is not getting rich. He is getting recognized. The money is almost secondary. What Hanssen wants, what he has always wanted, is to be the smartest person in the room, to prove that he sees what others cannot see, that he understands systems, institutions, and people better than the systems, institutions, and people understand themselves. The KGB and then the SVR give him that. The FBI, the organization he considers himself superior to in almost every respect, does not. That dynamic, that psychological engine running beneath everything else, is what drives 22 years of betrayal. It is also what makes him so dangerous. He is not motivated by desperation. He is motivated by contempt. Contempt for the institution he works for. Contempt for colleagues he considers intellectually inferior. Contempt for a system he believes he has beaten. He has beaten it, for now. But the system is beginning, slowly and clumsily, to notice that something is wrong. By the mid-1990s, the FBI knows it has a problem. Too many sources are disappearing. Too many operations are being compromised. Too many carefully built intelligence relationships are ending the same way. A recalled officer, a secret trial, an execution. The pattern is undeniable. Someone inside American intelligence is feeding names to Moscow. The question is who? The FBI opens an internal investigation. They call it Gray Suit. The assumption, based on the damage profile, is that the mole is inside the CIA. The losses look like CIA losses. The sources being burned are CIA sources. The operations being compromised are CIA operations. The FBI looks across the river at Langley and starts digging. They are looking in the wrong place. For 3 years, Gray Suit investigators build a case against a CIA officer named Brian Kelly. The circumstantial evidence is considerable. Kelly has the right access. His behavior raises flags. He fails certain internal assessments in ways that look suspicious. The FBI puts him under full surveillance. They go through his finances. They monitor his movements. They watch him for signs of dead drop activity. Brian Kelly is innocent. He is an experienced CIA counterintelligence officer who has spent his career hunting Soviet and Russian spies. He is not a mole. He is a man whose career and reputation are being systematically destroyed by an investigation pointed at the wrong target. The real mole is watching all of this. Hanssen knows about Gray Suit. He knows about the investigation into Kelly. He knows because he is still inside the FBI, still reading classified reporting, still attending counterintelligence briefings. He watches the investigators close in on an innocent man and does nothing to stop it. He lets it happen. It is, in its way, the clearest demonstration of who Robert Hanssen actually is. Not a reluctant spy, not a man tormented by what he is doing, a man who watches a colleague's life being destroyed and finds it useful. In 1997, Hanssen is assigned to the FBI's National Security Division at headquarters. He is now in one of the most sensitive positions in American counterintelligence. His job includes oversight of FBI technical operations against Russian intelligence. He is, once again, being paid to study the organization he is working for. He uses the access. He identifies additional classified programs and passes their details to the SVR. He warns his handlers that the FBI is increasing its technical surveillance of Russian intelligence officers in Washington. He provides details of how that surveillance works. The SVR adjusts accordingly. In 1999, Hanssen does something that crosses a line even by his own standards. He accesses a classified database and searches his own name. He wants to know if the FBI has opened a file on him. The search leaves a record in the system, a small anomaly, the kind of thing that a thorough investigator might notice. Nobody notices, not yet. But the walls are beginning to close, not because of anything the FBI does right, but because of money. In late 2000, an FBI officer working in Moscow makes contact with a former SVR officer who claims to have access to something extraordinary. A KGB file on an unidentified American mole, a file containing a fingerprint, an envelope, and a recording. The former SVR officer wants $7 million. The FBI pays it. The file arrives in Washington in late 2000. Investigators open it. Inside is a plastic bag. On the bag is a fingerprint. The recording is a telephone conversation between the mole and his KGB handler, captured years earlier. The voice on the recording is American, male. The accent is consistent with someone from the Chicago area. The fingerprint is run through the FBI database. It comes back to one person, Special Agent Robert Philip Hanssen. The recording is played to FBI officials who know Hanssen. They recognize the voice immediately. There is no ambiguity. 22 years of questions collapse into a single moment of clarity. The FBI now knows who the mole is. What they do not know is how much damage has been done, how long it has been going on, or whether Hanssen has any idea that he has been identified. They cannot arrest him immediately. They need evidence collected after his identification to ensure a prosecution that will hold. They need to watch him, to document his activities, to catch him in the act. They reassign him. In January 2001, Hanssen is moved to FBI headquarters and given a new position, nominally a senior role, actually a controlled environment where his movements and access can be monitored without raising his suspicion. He is given an assistant who is, in reality, an undercover FBI agent. Hanssen is suspicious. He is always suspicious. He tells colleagues the new assignment feels like a demotion. He is right. It is not a promotion. It is a cage. But he cannot stop. The need is too strong. The habit is too deep. On February 18, 2001, he drives to Foxstone Park. He parks his car. He walks to the wooden footbridge. He reaches underneath. The teams move in. 22 years. Caught not by the institution he spent 2 decades outwitting, but by a file purchased from a man looking to make $7 million. He knew the system better than the system knew itself. In the end, the system did not catch him. It bought the answer. Robert Hanssen is arrested at 3:05 p.m. on February 18, 2001. He is charged with espionage. The maximum penalty is death. He does not look surprised. He does not look frightened. He looks, by most accounts of the agents who arrested him, like a man who has been waiting for this moment for a long time and has already decided how he is going to handle it. He asks for a lawyer immediately. He gets one. What follows is one of the most carefully negotiated plea arrangements in the history of American espionage. The government wants information. 22 years of damage assessment requires 22 years of explanation. Which sources were burned? Which programs were compromised? Which intelligence was passed? Which operations were neutralized before they began? The full picture of what Hanssen gave away is not something that can be reconstructed from documents alone. The man who did it has to explain it. Hanssen agrees to cooperate. In exchange, he receives a guarantee that he will not be executed, life in prison without the possibility of parole. He accepts. The debriefings begin almost immediately and last 4 months. FBI and CIA counterintelligence officers sit across a table from the man who spent 22 years destroying their work and ask him to account for every year of it. Hanssen cooperates to a point. He answers specific questions when he has to. He volunteers nothing he does not have to volunteer. He is, even in defeat, still playing the game, still managing what he reveals and what he withholds. Still, in some fundamental way, convinced that he is the smartest person in the room. The damage assessment that emerges from those debriefings is classified in its entirety. What has been publicly acknowledged is damaging enough. 15 human sources lost. The exact number remains disputed, but the FBI's own internal review puts the figure at a minimum of 15 individuals whose identities Hanssen passed to Soviet or Russian intelligence. Of those, at least 3 are confirmed executed. Others received lengthy prison sentences. Others simply disappear from the record in ways that suggest outcomes the government does not publicly discuss. The tunnel beneath the Soviet embassy, compromised from the moment it was operational, tens of millions of dollars, years of engineering, neutralized before it produced a single piece of usable intelligence. The continuity of government plans, the nuclear war-fighting strategy, the signals intelligence collection methods, programs that cost billions and took decades to develop, handed over in packages left at suburban dead-drop sites across northern Virginia. The total damage is officially described by the FBI as catastrophic. That word appears in the unclassified summary of the damage assessment. Not serious, not significant, catastrophic. The investigation into what went wrong inside the FBI is almost as damaging as the espionage itself. How did this happen? How does a man spy for 22 years from inside the premier counterintelligence agency in the world without being caught? The internal review, conducted by a former FBI director and Judge William Webster, produces a report released in 2002 that is, in its own way, a devastating document. The FBI, the report concludes, had no effective internal security program. Agents were not required to take regular polygraphs. Financial disclosures were minimal. Access to classified systems was not adequately monitored. The culture of the organization assumed that FBI agents, by virtue of being FBI agents, were trustworthy. That assumption was never seriously interrogated. Hanssen exploited every one of those gaps. He knew they existed because he worked inside the system that was supposed to close them. He knew the polygraph schedule. He knew the financial disclosure requirements. He knew the access monitoring protocols. He knew exactly how much he could do without triggering an alarm because he understood the alarm system better than the people running it. The Webster report recommends sweeping changes to FBI internal security, mandatory polygraphs, stricter financial disclosure, enhanced monitoring of access to classified systems, a dedicated internal security unit with real authority and real resources. Most of the recommendations are implemented. They are implemented 22 years too late. Brian Kelly, the CIA officer who spent years as the primary suspect in the mole investigation, is formally cleared. The FBI issues him an apology. His career never fully recovers. He retires from the CIA in 2004. The years of surveillance, the destroyed reputation, the colleagues who pulled away, none of that is undone by an apology. Hanssen himself shows little remorse in the conventional sense. In his debriefings, he is analytical rather than apologetic. He discusses his operation with the detachment of a professional reviewing his own work. He identifies mistakes he made, things he would have done differently, operational security lapses that, in retrospect, he considers errors of judgment. He does not dwell on the people his actions destroyed, the sources who were executed, the officer whose career was obliterated, the colleagues who trusted him for 2 decades. At his sentencing in May 2002, he makes a brief statement. He apologizes. The apology is formal and measured. It does not sound like a man who has spent months confronting the human cost of what he did. It sounds like a man who understands that an apology is what the moment requires and is providing one accordingly. He is sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms plus 10 years. No possibility of parole. He will never leave prison. He is sent to ADX Florence, the federal supermax facility in Colorado, the same facility that houses Ramzi Youssef, the 1993 World Trade Center bomber, and Ted Kaczynski, the UNO bomber. 23 hours a day in a cell, 1 hour of solitary exercise, no contact with other inmates, no possibility of communication with the outside world beyond tightly controlled visits and correspondence. It is, in its design, the complete inversion of everything Hanssen spent 22 years building. The dead drops, the packages, the careful management of information flow, the precise control of what was known and by whom. All of it replaced by a concrete cell in the Colorado mountains where nothing moves and nothing changes, and nobody needs to know what Robert Hanssen knows anymore. He lives there for 20 years. On June 5, 2023, Robert Hanssen dies in his cell at ADX Florence. He is 79 years old. The cause of death is natural causes. He has spent the last 2 decades of his life in the most isolated prison environment the American justice system can construct. He never expresses remorse that anyone finds convincing. Robert Hanssen is dead. The damage he did is not. That is the part of this story that does not end with an arrest or a sentencing or a death in a supermax cell in Colorado. The intelligence Hanssen passed to Moscow between 1979 and 2001 did not expire when he was caught. It did not become irrelevant when he died. Some of it is still shaping the intelligence landscape today. Consider what was lost. The sources who were executed cannot be replaced. The intelligence relationships that took years to build, the trust that took decades to establish, the networks that were carefully constructed inside Soviet and then Russian intelligence, all of it was handed to Moscow in packages left under bridges and at the base of wooden signs in suburban Virginia parks. Those networks do not rebuild overnight. Some of them never rebuilt at all. The continuity of government plans that Hanssen provided in 1986 described the architecture of American survival in a nuclear war. Safe locations, communication systems, command and control structures. That information required a complete overhaul of programs that had taken decades to develop. The cost, in money, and in the time required to rebuild what had been compromised, runs into the billions. The full extent of what had to be changed, relocated, or abandoned entirely remains classified. The tunnel beneath the Soviet embassy is perhaps the most vivid symbol of the damage. Years of work. Tens of millions of dollars. An engineering achievement of genuine sophistication, operational from the moment it was compromised. The Soviets knew about it from Hanssen's first communication in 1985. They used it to feed disinformation for years. Every piece of intelligence collected through that tunnel has to be reassessed. Everything that came out of it treated as potentially manufactured. The tunnel did not just fail. It was turned against the people who built it. And then there is the broader question, the question that the Webster Report raises, but does not fully answer. How many other operations were compromised that have never been publicly acknowledged? How many sources were lost in ways that were attributed to other causes? How many intelligence failures of the 1980s and 1990s have Robert Hanssen's fingerprints on them that nobody has publicly connected to his name? The honest answer is that nobody outside a small number of cleared officials knows. The damage assessment is classified. The full list of what Hanssen provided is classified. The complete accounting of what was lost, what had to be rebuilt, and what could never be recovered remains, 20 years after his arrest, largely beyond public view. What is publicly known is enough. The FBI changes fundamentally after Hanssen. The Webster Report's recommendations are implemented. Mandatory polygraphs for agents with access to sensitive programs, stricter financial disclosure requirements, enhanced monitoring of classified system access, a dedicated inspection division with genuine authority, the culture of institutional trust, the assumption that an FBI badge is itself a sufficient guarantee of loyalty is formally abandoned. These changes come too late for the sources Hanssen burned. They come too late for Brian Kelly. They come too late for the programs that were compromised and the operations that were neutralized. But they matter. The FBI that exists after Hanssen is structurally different from the FBI that allowed him to operate for 22 years. Whether it is different enough is a question the next mole will eventually answer. Russia's intelligence services draw their own conclusions from the Hanssen case. The SVR and FSB study his operation carefully. What worked? What almost failed? How he maintained operational security for 2 decades inside a counterintelligence agency. How he managed his handlers. How he controlled the flow of information. His methods become, in certain respects, a template, not for recruitment. Hanssen was never recruited, but for understanding how a penetration agent inside a Western intelligence service can operate indefinitely if the institutional conditions are right. Those institutional conditions, the culture of assumed trust, the inadequate internal monitoring, the reluctance to suspect the most senior and most respected officers, are not unique to the FBI. They exist in varying degrees in every intelligence service in the world. Hanssen did not just expose the FBI. He exposed a structural vulnerability that every Western intelligence agency had to examine in the years after 2001. There is one more dimension to this story that is worth sitting with. Hanssen was not a broken man. He was not driven by ideology or coercion or financial desperation. He was a functioning, high-performing professional who attended Mass every Sunday, raised 6 children, maintained a stable marriage for decades, and was regarded by many colleagues as one of the most capable counterintelligence officers in the FBI. The picture of him that emerges from the debriefings, from the court documents, from the accounts of people who knew him, is not the picture of a man in crisis. It is the picture of a man who believed he was exceptional and found in espionage the only arena that confirmed it. That is the most unsettling thing about Robert Hanssen, not the damage. Not the duration. Not the audacity of operating inside the FBI's own counterintelligence division for 2 decades. The most unsettling thing is that he was not a monster. He was a man. A specific kind of man, driven by a specific kind of need, in a specific kind of institution that was not equipped to see what was right in front of it. The FBI spent 22 years looking for threats from the outside. Hanssen was the threat from the inside. He knew they were looking outward. He counted on it. He was right. The final accounting is this: 22 years of espionage, at least 15 sources compromised, at least 3 confirmed executed, billions of dollars in programs destroyed or abandoned, a counterintelligence agency fundamentally restructured in his wake, an innocent man's career destroyed by an investigation that spent years looking at the wrong person, $600,000 in cash and diamonds, 15 consecutive life sentences, 20 years in a supermax cell, death at 79, alone, in a concrete room in Colorado, and somewhere in the SVR archives in Moscow, a file on an agent named Ramon Garcia, the most valuable penetration of American intelligence in the Cold War era, a man who walked in voluntarily, asked for money, and delivered 22 years of catastrophic damage without ever shaking his handler's hand. What other declassified stories should we cover next? Drop your suggestions below. There are files that have been waiting decades to be opened. We are just getting started.